Hi, I'm Hollis Kurman, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about my new book, Hello, A Counting Book of Kindnesses, written by me, Hollis Kurman, illustrated by Barroux, and published by Otter-Barry Books. So the first question that I've been asked is, what inspired me to write this book in the first place? And really this story, as well as other stories that I'm writing and have written, were born of a desire to take diversity in children's books to a new level, to be able to share more stories about children who are refugees, children who are immigrants, and sometimes those stories are tricky to tell. And I really had a goal of trying to focus not so much on the horrors of the experience, but more on the kindness, the hope, the help that they experienced along the way. And when I started writing this book, there were hardly any children's books out there at all about refugees, and especially not for children so young. And the books that I was able to find all just felt very dark and despairing somehow. And I really was looking for a way in that would be more hopeful. I reached out to a wonderful young Syrian refugee artist called Yara Said, who lives and works in Amsterdam, where I also live and work. And although we didn't end up working together on this book, we had so much time together where we talked about everything and we shared our hopes and our dreams and our projects and our goals. And what I noticed in talking to her was that when she would look at these very dark children's books or the very dark projects she was being asked to work on, she had almost a physical reaction to it, like pulling away and shaking her head and saying, "Don't rub our noses in the horror. Kids will get it." And I had a notebook full of ideas and projects and notes, and this sounds a little bit cliche, but one night I literally woke up in the middle of the night and I had this sense of, I have it. What if we tried to bring this whole complicated journey of the refugee child down to just 1 to 10 and make a counting book of it? And the elements started to kind of click into place. 1 boat, 2 helping hands, 3 meals, 7 days, first week in our new land, etc., etc. And I sat down the next morning, I was all excited. I cannot draw. I am not the magician that Barroux is. So I did what I know how to do, which is I made a PowerPoint presentation to try and sketch out my idea. And I called Yara and she came over right away. I said, "I just want to run this by you." And just her reaction, she had tears in her eyes, she had goose flesh, and we both had this sense of, this is it. And I really wanted to bring this story to life, and I'm super excited to do that with Otter-Barry Books. So the second question is, why did I write this book for children who are so young? Why such a young age group for the readers? Well, first, as I mentioned, when I went out looking for books on the topic, there were hardly any, and especially not for children this young. And yet, in my opinion, it's especially important for young children to understand, to begin to understand human rights issues, understand the refugee situation, even though it is obviously a very delicate, very complicated subject. But children need to understand that the world around them is not always fair, that it's not always safe, especially for some groups, but it is also not hopeless. There is hope. There are things that even as very young children they can do to make a difference. And it's wonderful for children to realize that they can make a difference, sometimes even with the smallest acts of kindness. And unfortunately, the refugee situation is not going away anytime soon. It is enormous. Right now, even before the COVID pandemic, there were over 10 million children refugees, not even counting displaced peoples who are still stuck in their countries. This is a big issue. It's a difficult issue, and one that they're going to have to grapple with. And I think children need a framework. They need some kind of a base to be able to start processing these kinds of issues, having these kinds of discussions. And it's even difficult for parents and for teachers. So I'm really hoping that this book, in its own small way, can start to create a bit of that framework and that base for discussion. Of course, writing about rights issues and refugees for young children is tricky business. It's hard, and you have to, as with any complicated subject for children, you have to keep things simple enough, but also gripping enough that they are going to not only be able to, but also want to engage, learn more, figure things out, talk about it. But to be able to do that, it means you have to really focus on a few very key aspects of the situation and in some way try to relate it to their lives, things that they understand. So we know that all children can relate to being afraid, to losing someone or something they love, or at least being afraid of that loss. We know that all children understand a journey. I mean, every kid's fairy tale has a journey in it. And they know that not all parts of that journey are going to be easy or safe. All children want to be cared for. All children want to be loved. And I hope that our young readers are going to understand that refugee children, are just the same. It's important too to try and use analogies or do things to make the situation very concrete. So I'll often ask, for example, imagine that you had to pack everything up and leave suddenly because it wasn't safe to stay. And you had to fit everything that you would take into your backpack. What would you bring? Well, that's a tricky question even for adults to answer, but it's an important question to think about. What would you take with you? And lastly, it's really important to give kids the opportunity to ask lots and lots and lots of questions. And I hope that we'll be able to do that. So the third question is, tell us about your background in working with human rights and children's rights. Well, in my case, it goes back a very long way. I was really brought up that way to care deeply about human rights issues. And even when I was a very little girl, I used to organize every year a sort of street carnival to raise, with my next door neighbor, to raise money for care, to donate to children in need. I have no idea how much we raised, I don't remember. But human rights were also a core focus of my graduate school studies at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service and in a lot of the organizations that I've gotten involved with over the years professionally, from founding the committee in the Netherlands for Human Rights Watch, and I'm still in their global Women's Rights Advisory Council. I've recently joined the supervisory board of Save the Children in the Netherlands. I do a lot of work and sessions and discussions and interviews with school children at the International School on Human Rights and Refugees. And I've done a lot of research and events and interviews on both sides of the mic on this topic. It's something that is quite deeply rooted in me. Personally, I'm very lucky to be an immigrant by pull factors, that is to say, to have chosen to live in other countries for positive reasons, rather than through the push of having to run away from something scary. First by moving to France for my studies and for work, and then later to the Netherlands, where I now live, to be with my husband and also for my work. This much said, the immigrant and refugee story is my entire family history. So I grew up listening to the stories of my family, my grandparents and my great-grandparents, had to escape Central and Eastern Europe, escaping persecution, trying to make a better life for themselves. And I remember listening fascinated to the stories that they would tell directly or related then through my parents of not only their escape and the reasons they had to go, but also the journey. I remember later even mapping it out for our kids. Like first they were here and then here and then here and there, trying to get into America. And the older generation, my family, never understood why I would then choose to go back to Europe. They didn't get it, but so be it. And at the same time, all these years I've had the good fortune to really get to know a lot of refugees personally from all different places and cultures and religions and different ages. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we all can do, and share meals and share stories and help one another in different ways. And I think lastly, and this is a bit of a sensitive subject at the moment in the arts, I don't believe that you personally have had to live something completely and directly to be able to write about it or paint it or make a film about it. I think these human rights issues are so important that all hands on deck, that would be helpful. Getting more creative ways to bring these stories to life and get more people to understand them, I think is a good thing. It's also a big responsibility though, so we have to recognize if we are not directly affected by that situation, we have to be respectful, we have to do our homework, we have to really care enough to get it right, and if we do, I hope that we can create something that will have impact. The last question is, and I'm so glad you asked this question, what can families do? Well, luckily there's a lot that we can all do, because really it is all of our responsibility to promote and respect human rights, and it starts with us and it starts with our children. So importantly, children, even at a young age, should understand what their rights are. That's not a vague concept. They are defined in a declaration, what children's special human rights are. So we need to understand what our rights are, respect those of others, set examples for our children, and our children set examples for one another. So we as parents, we as teachers, whoever it may be. I think also we can do a lot now about raising awareness at home, at school, but now on social media to help counter some of the fake news, so supposedly, and conspiracies that are out there that are really doing a lot of damage. We have now an unprecedented opportunity to help make sure we create awareness of the right kind. We can also, of course, as in the book, make refugee families feel welcome, get to know them, help them out. There are all kinds of ways to do that. It's really easy to do, and I think children especially would benefit from getting involved. It's also important, what I mentioned earlier, to inform and engage, even if it's at the kitchen table in a group of friends or with whoever it is in the playground. If you hear something that's not right or see something that's not right, speak up, correct it. Even young children have an innate sense of fairness and what's right, and they can definitely do that. I think we as families, more from the adult side, also can help report abuses where we see them. You know, I had a discussion with some kids at school recently about, what if you're on a vacation, a holiday with your family, and you are being served by a very young child in a restaurant, and you think, that just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe there's something going on. Call it out. So, report abuse so that it doesn't thrive in the darkness. And then, of course, importantly, support human rights organizations, whether it's the big international ones like the ones I'm involved with, Human Rights Watch, Save the Children, Amnesty International, or all the wonderful local organizations, whether it's here in England and Europe or in countries where they're having a really hard time. There are all kinds of ways to help. Of course, donating money is one, but you can donate your time, or your stuff, your books, your clothes, or introduce people to other people who can help. There are all kinds of ways to help. And these are organizations that are really on the front line and know what they're doing, so helping them is really important, and it's become even more so in the time of the COVID epidemic, or pandemic, I should say. Children are not as affected by the disease, but I think we're going to see a lot more refugees, a lot more kids on the run or hungry. So we can help there too. And last but not least, for kids, start your own initiative. Be creative. Do something fun and exciting at school that gets things going. Both of my kids have worked on a lot of these kinds of projects at their international school, from organizing basketball tournaments with refugee teens to helping immigrant children learn the local language. So be creative, start something, and just be kind.